Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, May 20th, 2014. I'm Julie Robenheimer.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Josh Rimmer.
I'm Eklund, and thanks for joining us, Josh. And we are watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. I'm here to talk about, how wonderful my predictions were last night. I settled in for the Montreal Canadiens game. I watched all the previews on NHL Network. I listened to the Fan 590, the whatever the station is, and the TSN in Canada. And whatever that is, I listened to that too. And and I was all ready for the big game. I had it all going on, and all of a sudden, for 17 seconds, I was looking awesome. I had it going. For 17 seconds, I was correct. And then
reality set in.
The stupid butt of a defenseman on the Montreal Canadiens deflects a puck in, and poor Tokarski loses it. So this was all. We're gonna start with your thoughts, and then I'll get to mine because some of you guys were right about some things, and I will give you props for that. But because
Nash scored again too, by the way.
Yeah. Before we get to the other guys who have really nothing to say, let's go to Julie, who has lots to say about this game. Julie, your thoughts?
You want to see the watermelon cupcakes I'm gonna make this weekend? No, I'm kidding. I do have lots to say about this, and it's one of those things where we were debating on the impact of Martin St. Louis' mother's funeral on Sunday and how this would impact the team. And there was some other stuff going on in terms of reaction to Carey Price being out for this series and some words that were said at the direction of Chris Kreider, and how now both teams had something really to play for and to rally around and to really motivate them to play as a team, and that continued for the New York Rangers, not so much for the Montreal Canadiens. So we knew that this would be an important game, because it would mean you're either up 2-0 or it's tied, heading into Madison Square Garden. So we knew this was an important swing game. And it was one of those things where you had to show up, and the Canadiens just didn't show up. And you say, oh, the goalie. Look, it really didn't have anything to do with the goalie on that end of the ice, and it had everything to do with the goalie on the other end of the ice, because the Montreal Canadiens just could not get anything, not only past Lundqvist, but they had a hard time even getting shots on Lundqvist. So it's just one of those things where it's unfortunate that the game ended up the way that it did, especially in my opinion because the Bell Center, which is known for being a raucous crowd, was incredibly silent for long stretches throughout the game, which was incredibly disappointing to see, but it also shows you the high expectations that they have in Montreal. So, interesting game. I could chat more, but I think Josh is now finished with his lunch.
Yeah, I run from the gym home. Haven't showered.
Put your thoughts of last night's game into one sentence only. Just kidding. Go ahead.
I was right. Yeah. Or almost right. I knew that Rick Nash was going to score again last night. I just had that feeling. That's why I threw that out there yesterday. What can I say? I thought it was going to be a 5-1 final for the Canadiens. I knew that, or the Canadiens, 5-1 final for the Rangers. Now oh my God, what are you doing to me, Ak? 5-1 final with the Rangers. I just knew with Carey Price out, this is going to deflate the team, whatever confidence they had. They got a guy between the pipes that basically has no NHL playoff experience. And at the time we were doing the show yesterday, I don't think we knew that Tokarski was going to be the goalie at the time. We were still debating whether or not that was going to happen. But I just had the gut feeling that the Canadiens were done. All the confidence comes with what's in goal, and we know that from, unfortunately, here in Toronto. When your goalie stinks, the whole team stinks. And not saying the Canadiens stunk last night, but there were a couple of, not calls, but I don't know what the coach was thinking last night. I know, Ek, me and you were talking a bit last night during the game, kind of questioning. Did we ever figure out if he did call a timeout last night,
He
Eck?
didn't call a timeout. And again, I would like to throw this out there that Terrian never used his timeout, despite Subban playing like the last 6 minutes of the game essentially, and with a really interesting, perfect time to do it with 1:08 left, a face-off in the zone of the Rangers. He just let them play.
And Eck, Carlisle didn't call a timeout in that total meltdown against the Boston Bruins last year. I'm sure I see Mike shaking his head. Carlisle still had a timeout left to go when the game was over, and I was like, "Why don't you call a timeout?"
This is the thing.
Because he couldn't.
Mike, go ahead. Mike, you go ahead.
Because Carlisle couldn't take the timeout because the Bruins already had. You can't take a timeout after the other team has taken a timeout. And there was no stoppage between the third goal and the fourth goal, so he couldn't have taken a timeout. I've heard that attack and that accusation about Carlisle not using the timeout. That was the reason why, as opposed to Terrian, who I thought the other team took a timeout because I thought the Rangers took a timeout.
No one taking a timeout that I've seen.
Yeah.
The bottom line is this. Okay, this comes down to my key element of this entire Terrian rampage I've been on. Okay, this sums up in a nutshell. This man is playing not to lose versus playing to win, and that is what's been happening the whole playoffs. And it is so frustrating as a fan of this team as I am, trying to watch this team play and realizing they are completely being handicapped by it. Now, in a situation like that, immediately some people, when I said, why didn't Terrian call a timeout on Twitter? Not on Twitter, I said, why didn't Terrian call a timeout? Sorry, misplaced modifier. But here's the thing. Immediately people were saying, well, he didn't call a timeout because the Rangers were, tired. They had just iced the puck and he didn't want to give them a line change. It's like, that is playing not to lose. Who cares? You're down 3-1. Okay, Subban has just played 4 minutes in a row, and he's, to his credit, man, that guy's got energy, unbelievable amounts of energy, and he played 4 minutes in a row and just tried at the end of the game just to take it on himself, right? And you saw it. It was really fascinating. You don't see hockey players do that often. It was more of like it reminded me of like a Jordan-esque type thing where Subban was going to score a goal. He didn't care what position. He wasn't playing a position anymore. It was like open hockey, and Subban was going to score a goal at the end of that game. But come on, 1:08 left. You got you got a chance to set your things up, and even the announcers were kind of confused. You could tell they didn't want to rip them, but they were saying, well, they're taking their time getting into the box. They're taking their time, and it was like they were going to call a timeout. They were doing the typical things you do. And then nothing. Puck drops, and he's got a hodgepodge group out there because the people who just played the 2-minute power play are done. And also pulling the goalie with 4 minutes left when you're on a power play, I'm not a big fan of that because the other team can't just ice the puck into the net. That is a risky play. Mike?
Yeah, well, it does give them a two-man advantage, and to Terrian's credit, they never got a chance at the open goal, so it was a risk worth taking down 2 goals. I mean, I understand there's a lot of critics of Terrian, and he's not the traditional coach, and he's not well liked by his players. But I don't think in the situation that they were in yesterday, losing Price for the series, and they put Galchenyuk in the lineup for Bourneval. I think he put the best lineup out there. I mean, I know that there was some internal strife, as a lot of reports said that Budaj should have played over Tokarski. I don't think Tokarski was really. The only goal that you could maybe blame him on was the Nash goal. The other ones, I don't think he had a chance on. So I think it was inconsequential. And like Julie said, I think that the goaltending situation was that Lundqvist played arguably better than he did in Game 7 against the Penguins. All I can say is the pregame ceremonies at the Bell Center took on a new meaning. I think they now represent the Habs' playoff fortunes going up in flames because this team is done. They are done like dinner.
I'll tell you what, we have a really cool big TV in our house here, and I just want to say the pregame thing before the ice, before they put the flames on, Julie, when they have the ice on there and it's like disappearing into the ground, that is friggin' amazing. Gosh.
Can I just say
yes,
that I am incredibly thankful that NBC has decided to show not only the pregame ceremony in Montreal, but it means if you show it in Montreal, you got to show it everywhere. And so I'm so glad, because remember early in the playoffs when they didn't show it and everyone was talking about it, and I was tweeting to NBC Sports Network about it, saying, hey, gosh, you know, I mean, it was even trending in the United States, and we couldn't see it. So I'm excited that they're showing these ceremonies, because it's one of those things where, yes, it's a I don't want to say it's a privilege, but it's a bonus of being there in person to be able to see this kind of, you know, display that they put on. Not, like I said, not only in Montreal, because every team does this in a different way, but for us to be drawn into that drama through the TV, yes, it's not as good as it is when it's in person, but that's the same for the game. It's not as good as it is in person. That's why you buy a ticket. That's why everybody wants to go to these games. But when you can't go to the games because you live 8 hours away, you want to still be a part of that, and you still want to be drawn into that drama and that excitement that all of these pregame ceremonies and presentations really do. I mean, that is their job, is to get the fans fired up. So in my mind, I always thought it was pretty ridiculous that they didn't show it. So I'm glad that they're showing it. That's all. I'm glad they're showing it. I'm glad we're getting to hear all these different anthems. It's great. Yeah.
This is a John Shannon thing, Josh. This is a Hockey Night in Canada thing, actually, that they're taking off of. Because this, and I'll go to you, Josh, here on this. But this is a Hockey Night in Canada does this better than anybody. They just turn the mics off and you watch the team skate on the ice, and they figured this out. This was from what I understand, a John Shannon thing from way back. But and NBC's picking up on it, and you know what? It makes sense. It just works for hockey. Josh?
I agree with you 100%. Got to show the pregame ceremonies. It's awesome, especially when they do like they do tributes to the Army, the Navy, the military, all that stuff. I think that's great for TV. And speaking of NBC, guys, I don't know if you guys caught Mike Milbury's rant on torching basically Thomas Vanek, saying Vanek turned down $50 million from the Islanders. What a break for the Islanders. And then he went on to rip how he was shooting the puck and showing viz of him basically missing the net every time. I mean, Milbury loves to carve guys.
He should.
Usually it's Ovechkin, but Ovechkin's not playing, so his next victim is Vanek.
Josh, he's right in this case. Yeah. Vanek is absolutely mailing it in, and has mailed it in since basically, he mailed it in the Olympics.
Does this hurt his value, Ek, in your opinion?
Oh, it's killing his value. He's absolutely right. Mike, you don't think so? I completely think so.
Because he's going to one place and everybody knows he's going to one place, so it's not going to ruin his value. He's not going to be on the open market. He's going to Minnesota, and I think this reflects it. I mean, Don Cherry had said the same thing in the first intermission yesterday. He echoed what Milbury said. He said, he showed the goal, the McDonough goal, that Vanek wasn't covering the point. I mean, but you know what? They wouldn't have gotten to this series if it wasn't for Vanek against Boston. He's always been a Bruins killer, and he scored some key goals against the Bruins. So, Montreal has gotten their value out of the trade that they made with the Islanders. Well, let me just say, I agree with Julie. I mean, I like the spectacle. I like what NBC is doing. I've been, in Buffalo, have received Hockey Night in Canada for years on our cable, but we don't get it in high def, and to be able to see and hear at the crowd of the United Center with the national anthem or the presentation at the Bell Center in high def on NBC is great. And it's also great to hear Mike Emmerich. He's the best in the business. I think last night it was hilarious where Kreider was being booed every time he touched the puck, and Emmerich said, "Somewhere Zdeno Chara understands." He's a gem.
Now, Doc's awesome. My daughter loves when he's on. We play the verb game. My daughter writes down every verb that Doc Emmerich uses throughout the game, and it's the funniest thing because literally it's a huge page. He shovels.
What is the verb game?
The verb game is this: as you listen to Doc Emmerich, he never once in a period will use the same verb twice. So essentially, he will occasionally, but he shovels the puck, he winds the puck, he slides the puck, he releases the puck. It's unbelievable, and you can sit there and they just write down. I say write down every verb. We'll count the verbs at the end of the game, and it's a fun thing to do with your kids if you're.
Is that a drinking game at all for the adults too?
It could be. because every time he repeats it, he does repeat occasionally, but it is really rare, and he's amazing with it. I mean, it's just, and that's tough. I mean, and I don't know, does he have a list there? I want to add just all these verbs in his head. But what's amazing about it is he actually, these aren't just random verbs. You know, a player shoveling the puck literally is when a player looks like they're shoveling the puck forward, or a player slapping the puck. Where you often hear, he kept it in the zone. Emmerich will say he corralled it at the blue line. Or it's amazing. These things are just.
It's true.
It's really good, and it's actually what's crazy is Doc is not on radio, but he actually is made for radio the way he announces the games.
George Matthews, who did the radio for the Columbus Blue Jackets, did the same thing. I used to do. I worked junior hockey games in PEI back in the late '90s with George when he was doing play-by-play, and he showed me. He had a book listed of all the different sayings, so he wouldn't say the same thing over and over again. It was kind of interesting. He spent a lot of time putting this book together, and he told me that Emmerich does the same thing. So Emmerich somewhere has a book that he lists all these verbs so he doesn't say the same word over and over again.
That's great because it's a fun game.
He's a walking thesaurus.
He's amazing.
Yes.
And a great guy. And a lot of these announcers are great guys, but he's really a good guy. So all right.
Thomas Vanek.
One more thing.
Yeah.
I know that they lost last night, and I'm still picking Montreal in the series, and I picked the Rangers before this injury. I just think that this will somehow rally them. But I'll throw this out there. Last night, Vigneault played Therrien like a fiddle. And how I feel he did this, what he did was, we've seen this before. If you're really obsessed with line matching, this is perhaps the time when I shouldn't have Slapshot on behind me.
I was just going to say.
Okay, hold on. We're going to go back to that.
I love when Josh laughs so hard that he can't sit still.
And he starts coughing.
Yeah, we might go past that part.
Crying.
I need to remember the times in Slapshot that aren't appropriate for TV.
I'll have to check that on the replay.
Yeah, there was seconds.
Okay, whoever said coughing gets a point.
All right. So the fiddle part. Let me get back to this because that really was distracting for a second. All right, so here we go. Playing him like a fiddle, and this is what's happening. Therrien is obsessed with matching lines. So, what does Vigneault do? What do you do if you're an assistant coach and the other person is obsessed with matching lines? You play right into their hands. He throws his fourth line out, so Therrien throws his fourth line out. You throw your third line out. You throw your fourth line back out. So Therrien throws his fourth line back out. What he was doing was essentially getting Therrien to keep his best players off the ice by who he was putting out, because he knew who Therrien was going to match with, and that was a little bit ridiculous, and it was very frustrating to watch. And at some point, again, this is playing not to lose versus playing to win, Julie. And I'm going to let you guys talk for a second because the dog is going crazy. So 1 sec, I'll be right back.
Okay.
All right.
So Julie, your thoughts on this?
Well, I will agree with the whole idea of playing. I mean, obviously, I think they're playing to win, but
yeah.
I think it's a matter of being on the offensive rather and acting versus kind of being on the defensive side of it and reacting. And I think he tried to get out and do the line matching and force it and all that stuff, but in doing that, he ended up reacting, because every time they put a line out, he would be like, okay, and he would react and make the line change. So it's one of those things where in his mind, he is pushing the pace, he is getting what he wants out there, but he's doing it at the expense of a solid flow and, getting the players into a rhythm. When you have your best players out for a 15-second shift because the line's changed and you want to get that matchup, are you really doing yourself a benefit, or are you doing yourself a disservice? And that's where I think that Therrien's kind of, losing his mind. Because we heard it last night that he's losing his mind, although at the time he was yelling at people. But, that's what's happening is, he is in – I don't even want to say that he's being out-coached, because I feel like he's out-coaching himself.
Right.
Well,
exactly what he's doing. He is absolutely out coaching himself, and Alain Vigneault is out coaching him. I think it's both. Mike?
The one advantage that both of these teams had coming into this series was the fact that they were four-line teams. I think all the teams that have made it to the conference finals are four-line teams. And I think it was to Tarian's benefit in the Boston series to get out Prost, Weiss, and Briere against the fourth line. Even Boston is recognizing that their fourth line was too slow against that group, and that was the difference in the series. Here you're coming up against a Rangers team that has a fourth line that is just as quick and just as able to play effectively. Now last night they didn't have Broussard in the lineup. They moved Dominic Moore up to the third line. They had a crash line of Carcillo, Brian Boyle, and Derek Dorsett, and they were hitting everything that was moving. They, with their physicality, I think they dominated the fourth line matchup. Now, yes, I will grant you don't want your fourth line playing 10 minutes, and if you're Montreal, you want Pacioretty and you want Plekanec out there as much as you possibly can. But your fourth line is integral to you winning, so I don't think it's a big problem that they were out there. Maybe they were out there a little too much, but you have to get that fourth line moving for them to have a chance to win.
You do, and it's not. I'm not going to say the fourth line was out too much because they weren't, but they were. It was the timing that Vigneault knew when to make this move. He wouldn't do this move when the first line was going well, and then he would say, "Okay, I'll throw the fourth line out." Now, if you're playing to win, you leave your top line out against the fourth line and you go for it. But instead, Therrien takes his top line off and puts his fourth line out against the fourth line, or the third line, which, by the way, in my opinion, is the fourth line on the Canadiens, because that Giunta line is horrendous. I mean, that's Giunta we've watched Giunta play for years here in Philly. I'm a big Giunta guy, but he right now can't skate. He's not playing defense, and that's what he does. He plays defense. I know he's the captain of this team, but this is my last complaint about Terry, and we'll move on. Before Nash's goal, there was a long shift on the ice when it was the first time in the whole game that the Rangers basically had some sustained pressure, and they were cycling the puck. And this was against Giunta and Eller in that line, and they were circling and cycling. And Giunta or somebody ices the puck because they had to ice the puck to get a stoppage.
Mm-hmm.
Then, they can't change him, of course, so they keep the line out there. They ice the puck again quickly. So they're really tired now because we've gone through. They haven't gotten a change. They've had to ice the puck twice. They do get the puck out of the zone. They do get a change. 45 seconds later, there's a face-off in the Rangers zone. Vigneault realizes that they want Giunta against Nash's line. So Vigneault throws Nash out there again, and Therrien throws Giunta's line back out there. Okay, this is an offensive zone face-off in the Rangers zone. Throws Giunta out there. This leads to the goal that Nash scores, and when you look on that goal that Nash scores, and you watch the players on the Canadiens, they're beat dead tired trying to get back and cover, and then that's why that 3-on-1 happens. That's why Nash ends up all by himself. Why the hell would you put your tired line in an offensive zone faceoff in that situation where they've got to get back just because you want to keep that Giunta against Nash thing going? I mean, this again is playing to your opponent's strengths instead of your own. You need to say, come beat us. You're in our building, come beat us. Line matching is fine if you're going to use it to your advantage. If you're going to throw out your best line against the fourth line, but if you're going to throw out, or the third line, but if you're going to throw out if you're just going to play right into their hands, that's my rant. Sorry. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Some coaches are a slave to their matchups. If he determined that he wants the Giunta line against the Nash line, fatigue obviously should be a factor. But if especially if in an offensive zone faceoff, he still wants to stick with those matchups. I mean, in that instance, it ended up killing the Canadiens. But I mean, Michel Therrien is not exclusively the only coach in the NHL, and I know there are a lot of them that are a slave to line matchups, and they have to take advantage.
This is the conference finals, and this is what happened in the conference finals. You dissect everything, okay?
Right.
This could happen on a rogue Tuesday in Winnipeg or whatever, but this happened in the conference finals in a game that was 1-1. When you're in a situation where you have no reason to do that. I mean, that to me is the kind of mistake that, combined with not calling a timeout, combined with in the third period, like he had one point, he had Plekanec Pacioretty and Briere out, and I was like, this is going to be they line up for the face-off. I'm like, okay, he's going for it now. He's putting offense out there. He's going to go for it. They played about 15 seconds because Vigneault pulled his checking line out. So immediately he took them off. So Vigneault therefore has done exactly what he needs to do. He's neutralized that offensive line without it doing anything at all. He neutralized them. Again, Therrien playing right into his hands. Julie?
Well, that's exactly what I was saying when you disappeared.
Okay.
Was that,
all right.
So.
Yeah. Well, Josh, what are your thoughts?
100%.
Yeah, it's just frustrating.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was questioning what he was doing last night as well, kind of shaking my head. I didn't agree with what he was doing, the way he was coaching. Basically got to put that loss on the coach. I don't say that too often. I'm always usually the opposite, where I say don't blame the coach. Don't blame the 34 coaches that have been fired in the last 3 years. But yeah, I mean, he's really at fault for the way they played last night.
Key moments. I mean, they played, and people are ripping me because they're going to rip me about this because they got 40 shots on goal, and Lundqvist was the difference. And granted, he was the difference, right? But the bottom line is this: it's like the Montreal Canadiens are where they are right now, not because of Michel Therrien. They are where they are right now because they have a lot of heart on that team and in that dressing room.
Oh, that's not what I thought you were going to say.
What was I going to say, Julie?
Yeah, well, it reminded me back in the day when he was coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins, and remember they made it to the Stanley Cup final, and from a few people inside closed doors, it was, we are not here because of Therrien, we are here in spite of Therrien.
No,
that's what I thought you were going to say about this.
No, you're right. I mean, and I know those guys behind closed doors, and they were defensemen, and they were frustrated, and they were getting screwed, and it finally came across to me. And also, Mark Recchi, the first time he was in Montreal, by the way, if you ask Mark Recchi about Michel Therrien, you'll get some really interesting quotes too, because he's the guy who was the Danny Briere of that team, and he was. So what Therrien is good at is turning a team against him, and that does have some merit to it. Okay, there's a point at which that has merit to it. There's a point at which the team.
It's like it's like the Herb Brooks thing, where if they're all mad at him, they don't have time to be mad at each other.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I have a Herb Brooks story that exactly exemplifies this, and then I will stop talking because I'm talking too much today. But I'm obviously fired up. All right, so I have a friend, who was on those Herb Brooks Rangers teams, and he was a respected guy. He was actually the assistant captain of that team at the time that Herb Brooks was coaching the Rangers. This is right after the Miracle on Ice when he was in the NHL. The Rangers had I think you've heard this story, Julie, probably on a podcast, but the Rangers had a horrible game, and they were just. My friend was playing on that team, and he was sick as a dog, throwing up on the bench. Just the whole game, he shouldn't have even been playing, but he was out there trying his best, and he's one of those guys. He was completely respected, like Briere, completely one of these guys who just absolutely is a veteran. The next day comes up, and Herb calls him into the office before practice and says, "Listen, buddy, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to just tear you apart today at practice. Just to let you know, I'm going to go at you so hard. I'm going to say this is all your fault. I don't care if you were bleeping sick. I don't care about this. You let the team down. It's all on you. And you're lucky to still be in the league. You should have been out of here years ago. I'm going to rip you to shreds. But no, it's not personal. What I'm doing to you is completely just my attempt to get the team mad and to get them focused in. And but don't ever tell anybody until you've retired this story, because I don't want them to think that I'm manipulating whatever." I didn't get the story until after Herb was long gone. So he was out there and he's on the ice, and immediately is this you, man? This guy right here is the reason we lost. He was ridiculous. He was a terrible player. And the players are like, wait, he was sick. Come on, you saw he was throwing up. No, I don't care if he's sick. He shouldn't be in the NHL anymore. He's an idiot. And he just ripped him to shreds. And the whole team got like, wow, this is ridiculous. And the team they went on a 10-game winning streak. He said they just completely went nuts. And they didn't speak to Herb at all, and they were mad at him, but they won. That is one way of doing it, right? That's the right way to do it. That's talking to the player and everything. What Michel Therrien has done is the same kind of stuff with Briere, but there's been no conversation that I've heard of or anybody that I've talked to has heard of. Maybe one day we'll hear it, but I honestly don't think there has been. So take that for what it is.
We all know that Therrien has a limited shelf life wherever he goes, but I don't think, and who knows, I could be wrong. I don't think that even if they lose this series, that he's going to be fired at the end of this season. It can be written off as, well, Carey Price got hurt. We were on our way to the Stanley Cup Finals, but Carey Price got hurt. It's a built-in excuse for them falling short. And now there'll be some ramifications during the off season. We've had Subban's contract, as we talked about a couple times. There maybe some players will be moved out, but I mean, let's just say it would create a firestorm in Montreal if he was fired this off season. If he fails next year and it's 3 years, and then he reached the end of his shelf life, then then it's probably right for them to move on. But I off their success this year, I can't see Therrien taking the fall.
Well, there's an irony here because the team they're playing against, the Rangers, is really as good as they are for a large part because of their hatred of John Tortorella.
Right.
And Vigneault is good. He's a good coach, but they are, Josh, in my opinion, they are what they are now because, well, first of all, Tortorella taught him how to block shots like no one's business. And even though he was a completely ridiculous slave driver, they hated him. They became a really good defensive team. But eventually, Tortorella doesn't take him anywhere and gets fired. I think this, maybe 3 years from now, the Canadians are back in this situation with a different coach, and they can look back on this time with Therrien and say, yeah, fine, that brought us together. But for right now, Josh, that's how I see it, at least.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And let's not forget again, guys, we talked about this before on the show. The fact, what happened with Marty losing his mother, this team's been a total different team since that happened. Even the goaltender, Lundqvist. I haven't seen Lundqvist play this well in a couple years, maybe. I haven't seen him play the way he's playing. He's a beast out there. Right now, I think he's the best goalie out of all 4 series. Corey Crawford obviously has done well of late lately, but you know what? I honestly believe Lundqvist is found his game, and he's a man on a mission right now, and he's a big reason why the Rangers are up 2-0 right now on the Montreal Canadiens, and a big reason why, obviously, they defeated the Pittsburgh Penguins. I think you got to give a lot of credit to Lundqvist. The King is finally acting like a king.
Oh yeah, no, and he's why they beat the Flyers too. I mean, he's definitely. I mean, he is playing that well right now, and I mean, there's no question about that. The thing with Lundqvist has always been the same. Like, if you're going to score on Lundqvist, you have to do it quickly.
Early.
Yeah, early. Exactly, early is right, and also in the individual shots quickly. Just in terms of if you wind up or set up to take a normal shot on Lundqvist, he's going to stop at 90% of the time. But if you just whack at the puck, he's back in his net. He will let up goals. That's how the Flyers beat him all the time. The Penguins really didn't figure that out, but I mean the Montreal Canadiens need to do that. There's some of these beautiful tic-tac-toe plays don't really work with him. What works with him is the goal. The best example I can use is the Aikison goal in Game 7 that the Flyers scored, where to get back within 1 was just a puck was bouncing whack at the puck. That's how you score on Lundqvist. He's back in his net. You can beat him on those kind of plays.
Well, if you notice that the opening goal for Montreal in Game 1 and the only goal that they scored yesterday were both of flub deflection shots that sort of ballooned over his shoulder and went into the net. It's almost like Dominik Hasek used to be. You could make a 110 mile an hour slap shot and he's gonna glove it. But if you could throw a shot that just flubs and it's gonna get by him. It's weird.
I want to ask you, Julie. You covered Dustin Tokarski in Ottawa, right? In the juniors?
No.
No, you didn't cover that? I wasn't sure if you covered that World Juniors or not.
No, my first one was 2010.
Oh, this was 2009. His was 2009, right? Right, sorry about that. Yeah, so, because I was trying to get...
Plus, Team USA was awful in 09. That was the year they got relegated.
Yeah, right.
I saw Tokarski 2 years ago at the Calder Cup Finals when he played for Norfolk. And, he was pretty good and pretty solid, and they won in 4 straight over the Marlies. didn't really stand out as like a top NHL prospect, and he was traded from Tampa to Montreal for Cedric Desjardins. I think it was earlier this year, but he's getting his opportunity now, and he might be Montreal's backup in the future. 24 years old. They might think that he has a NHL backup talent.
I mean, Bergeron did a good job with this team in general. I mean, and obviously picking up Tokarski was a good move. Weaver was a great move. And Vanek was a good move for the Boston series. But Josh, what I keep thinking of is something we talked about during the trade deadline. Why didn't they make a play for Marty Brodeur?
Yeah, that's a good question. Why didn't they? And also remember, they also have Devin Dubnyk still. I'm surprised they didn't even give him a try in goal. Maybe we might see Devin Dubnyk.
We really might. I mean, it reminds me of Markstrom in that first year that I covered the Stanley Cup Finals. It really does. When the Oilers got down to Markstrom, it was. Yeah. I mean, where is he nowadays? I mean, geez.
Markkanen, yeah.
Markkanen, not Markstrom. Markkanen, yeah, he was like the fifth goalie we saw in that Stanley Cup Final.
But yeah, Marty's probably wondering, hey, I wish I would have gone to Montreal. I wish I would have asked for a trade to Montreal, because we still don't know if he's going to be with the Devils this year. That affair might be done with. He might go somewhere else. He could. I doubt he's going to end up in Montreal now, but
no, he could end up there very easily. I agree. I mean, that would make some sense. I mean, obviously his dad was in that. He's from. I mean, gosh, to play for the Montreal Canadiens for Marty Brodeur would probably be a dream. Right now he could be the guy. I mean, but that's the problem is
he wants to be a starter though. Right. That's the only thing with him. He thinks he can be a starter in the NHL, and I don't know if he'll go to Montreal.
I don't know that he still thinks he can be a starter in the NHL.
I mean, you could say, and I agree with your point, Ak, that you've said over the last little while. You said, well, why didn't Pittsburgh go after Brodeur? Why didn't Montreal go to Brodeur? Maybe Brodeur said, I want to be the starter, and you're not going to start him over Marc-Andre Fleury and over Carey Price.
Not what
I don't necessarily know that Brodeur wants to be the starter, or like X said, is okay with not being the starter. But I do know that Marty Brodeur wants to be like a 1A, 1B. Right. He wants to get, 30 to 40% of the games.
Yeah.
At the minimum. Whereas if you go with a team that has a legit number one, he's maybe going to see 20% of the games. Maybe.
Right. Yes.
So I think that's where there's the fine line between Marty's okay being the backup, yes, but I don't think in a traditional backup sense. I think he wants to be 1B.
Right. Guys, if we're talking about Brodeur here, I would not be at all surprised. I know I said yesterday I don't see the Sharks moving out Niemi, but then I heard last night that apparently they are going to try to move him.
Yeah, they're trying to move
perfect spot.
They said.
Yeah, the perfect spot I could see Brodeur going, San Jose, reunite with his former coach Larry Robinson, who he has a really good relationship with Larry. I could see Brodeur going to San Jose.
I could, but the Sharks are telling everybody that they're going to get younger in goal. Now, whether or not that's the case or not is a question. Now, I agree, Julie, with what you're saying as far as he wants to be a 1A, but that's next year. As far as this year's trade deadline, I think he would have gone someplace to be a backup that had a team that had a chance to win. Like this situation, Montreal should have seen this.
I would agree with you for this year, for sure.
Yeah, and Montreal should have seen. I mean, when you're a team like the Canadiens, or let's throw out another team that's still playing. I mean, that has a let's take the Chicago Blackhawks. Who's their backup, right? I mean, we know.
Antti-Raanta. Yeah.
Right, and are they going to be comfortable with him? That's no real difference than what Montreal is. Some of these teams it used to be that when you went into the playoffs with a cup contending team, you made sure you had a backup. Like the Canadiens are at this point right now. Maybe they didn't consider themselves a cup contending team, but they did in terms of the moves they made. I mean, they went after Weaver, they went after Vanek, so they were trying to go somewhere with this. So they didn't see themselves as a cup contending team, but
well, I mean, cap ramifications. One of the fallouts of them is that you're not really able to keep a really good goaltender as a backup. I mean, it was a luxury for the Kings to have Jonathan Bernier, a former first-round pick, as their backup goaltender. The Blackhawks had Ray Emery, who played pretty well during the season for them. Those were luxuries. I mean, Boston had Chad Johnson, and not to diminish Chad Johnson, but a relatively inexperienced NHL goaltender. The Canadians had Peter Budaj. The days of a team having, the days of like the New York Islanders having Rolly Melanson as the backup to Billy Smith are probably gone.
The Blues had 3 goalies this year, guys.
Yeah, right.
There were actually 4 if you include Ryan Miller, but they had Jake Allen, they had Halak, and they had Brian Elliott.
Right.
Yeah. Let's talk about something. We had a little debate going on yesterday before we end the show. We had this thing that we were talking about between us on our own little text messaging thing that we do before the shows. And it was kind of interesting. It was between Mike and Julie, of course, because those two, you can't put them in the room together for a second. Mike's comments, it was about Ovechkin and about what was happening over in the World Juniors. And since we have no games tonight, I thought this would be a good time to touch on this. Ovechkin gets hurt, and thankfully it doesn't seem very serious. I mean, the way it was being painted out, there was, oh my gosh, of course it's Russia, so not Russia, but it's Belarus, so it's probably even worse than as far as getting media out, real media out, right? So no one knew what was happening, but now he's just going to miss a game, so that's no big deal. But it brought up the debate, Mike, that you were saying, and Mike, what was your point in this argument?
Well, I mean, I realize the relationship between the IIHF and the NHL. If the NHL ever wants to have a Canada Cup, they need the IIHF to agree to it. The relationship with the Olympics, but I know that a lot of teams are not exactly fans of the fact that they have to send that there's some of their players want to play in the World Championships and risk the fact that they're going to get injured. Now, if Alex Ovechkin would have torn an ACL, that would have had a significant effect on the Caps next year. Not taking into consideration just financial reasons, but I mean, maybe he would not be the same player ever again if he tore his ACL and lost a step. Eric Stahl got hurt last year at the World Championships. Alex Edler, I think, went low on him and hurt his knee. Eric Stahl was not the same player this year that Eric Stahl has been in years past. It had a real detrimental effect on the Carolina Hurricanes. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of our organizations would like to say to their star players, because they can't say specifically, don't go, but they're probably saying to them, could you please not go, because we don't want you to get hurt.
Julie?
And Ovechkin came back as well after the Olympics, and he wasn't the same player. You knew he was pissed off because of the way he was using the Olympics.
I agree with that. So, Julie, your argument in this whole thing?
My argument in this is that in the World Championships, there are a plethora of players who say no, who don't go.
Right.
And some may do it because they're already hurt. They're, the grind of the season, and it's more games, and they don't really need to do it. But there is nobody holding a gun to anybody's head saying you must go to the World Championships as soon as your season is over. So if Alex Ovechkin doesn't want to play, he doesn't have to play. And I think it's ridiculous to kind of say this is an NHL IIHF issue, because the NHL isn't necessarily giving permission for these players to play. They can. Their season is over. They are allowed to go. Where they need permission is in the Olympics because it's in season. They're taking a break, whereas right now their commitment is pretty much done. I mean, technically it's still around until the 1st, but their commitment is over. So they are free to go and play this. There's nothing stopping them from doing it except for their own free will. So if they want to exercise that right, they are fully capable of doing it, which is one of the reasons why, getting back to this debate, insurance is such a big thing for these national federations, because if they get hurt, it is the national federation that pays the rest of their contract should they be unable to play. Where the teams are hurt financially is potential revenue loss in regards to, maybe, like, let's say Alexander Ovechkin goes down with an injury for a year, and he can't play for the Washington Capitals next year. Will they see a loss in revenue? Yes. They'll get it in ticket sales, season ticket sales. They could get it in their inability to make the playoffs, which with him they didn't really do anyways. So you can make that argument. But there are so many other ways. But to say, oh well, I don't want to have to pay your $9 million contract next year if you get hurt, that's not true. That's not an argument because that's not how it works. So when you look at it, you look at what the teams are doing, and Team USA, because they have to pay the premiums on this insurance, and you've noticed the past, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years, they've gotten younger and younger and younger and younger and younger at the World Championships.
Right.
They've also gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper in regards to the premiums that they have to pay to insure those NHL contracts. So, a lot of people go, oh, well, this is just a hodgepodge team of, USA. Oh, honestly, they could have James Van Riemsdyk, they could have Phil Kessel, they could have so many players at their disposal and totally kick butt at this World Championships. But instead, they've gone a less expensive route in regards to the insurance that they have to pay. They've also gone with a more learning experience route, where they want to give these players who are the future of USA Hockey the opportunity to play against the best of the rest, we'll say, and see what they can do. And that's why, a lot of people go, oh my God, this is the best Team USA could put out there. No, this is not the best Team USA could put out there. But they're pretty damn good, and they're highly entertaining, and if they win a medal, whoop-de-doo.
Well, let's just say this. I mean, where the insurance doesn't cover, and I will grant all your points, Julie, but where the insurance doesn't cover, on top of lost revenue because of ticket sales, on top of the loss of possible playoff gate, is the fact that you're not going to be getting back the same player that you sent to the World Championships. It's a roll of the dice.
But they didn't send them. That's the point. That is the point, Mike.
But wait, Julie, wait. Let me step in for a second. Let me step in for a second if I could. They are still under contract, Julie, and and in their contracts, these guys have things like they can't ski.
Yep.
They can't do. There's stuff in there.
They can't go on a motorcycle.
Right. They can't do these things, right, Josh? So these contracts are really restrictive. So, in a way, the NHL teams are letting them do this.
Yeah.
But
you're letting them play hockey. And who's to say?
The facts. I mean, this is a business, and the Olympics. I mean, we're talking about we don't know whether the teams will go to the players will go to the Olympics again, and this whole thing, for what it's worth, as well as anyone, this is a big batch of politics because the reason players go to play on.
This is 100% where you lose me. How many times have we seen players get injured working out in the summer?
Oh yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. It's
injuries happen. Injuries happen. They're playing sports they're paid to play. Injuries happen.
They do.
Claude Giroux's next contract won't allow him to play golf.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, you can't put these guys in a glass bubble.
That's exactly right. This is where you lose me. You will not win the argument. You can obviously state your case, but you will not convince me that this is something that the NHL can really say yay or nay to. Because if you do it here, you got to do it everywhere. And then you're going to take the World Junior players who are under NHL contracts, specifically the Canadians, which is going to make them all super crazy and excited, and say, oh, well, I'm sorry, you have a signed NHL contract, so you can't go play for your country. Sorry.
The first time we've gotten the arms and Julie, the super crazy and exciting thing. I like that. That's nice. That's awesome. No, I'm with you. I'm with you 2 of 3, but let's answer me this question. Why are those American players over there right now?
What do you mean, the younger players?
Yeah, why are they there?
To get experience and because they're cheap?
Doesn't it also have to do with their future hopes for being on the Olympic team?
Yes.
Well, that's why I say they're going for experience.
But not just experience. I mean, remember Bobby Ryan didn't go to one of these things, and didn't that, and a lot of, there's a politicking. There's politicking going on here too. There definitely is.
Honestly, if I'm Danny DeKeyser, if I'm Johnny Gaudreau, if I'm Jimmy Hayes, if I'm all of those players, and I'm 22, 1, 3, whatever, and Team USA comes knocking on my door, there's no way I'm saying no.
Well,
unless I'm hurt and can't play.
I mean, I know that
Bobby Ryan was a different situation.
I know that with Team Canada, they do always point. They always give like a check in the column to players, and I'm just going back. Guys like Ryan Smith, or who played for Canada and who got experience and who went over there and played for them. Well, yeah, Rick Nash.
Okay, I'm gonna erase all of this. Jack Johnson has played in every single World Championship, with the exception of last year because he had a groin injury and couldn't play.
Yeah.
And did that help him make the Olympic team?
No,
I agree with you.
That was a glaring omission. I mean, he should have made Team USA
All I'm saying,
instead of.
I rest my case. Thank you very much.
It was Team USA. We're talking about Team Canada. I mean,
Well, I think I really appreciate the debate, Jules, because it's a really good, and you know this better than anyone else. And there is definitely, but and people who just don't often realize enough, and why I wanted to talk about this is they don't realize that these players have two careers very distinctively, and one is their NHL career and one is their international career, and they are not connected, and in hardly any way at all. I mean, they sit there and you can say that they're going to have. Last year they were judging who was going to go to the Olympics by the beginning of the NHL season, so you could say that was connected. But really, at the end of the day, they're not connected because there were players that both Canada and the U.S. took that had bad beginnings of the season, and then players who they left on the sideline who had great beginnings of the season. So it's very tough because there's only so many spots. There's incredibly amount of talent. So at the end of the day, there's a benefit to going to these things for these kids. Johnny Hockey might make every Olympic team, from this point forward. But if it comes down to him and somebody else, him and Phil Kessel or whatever, if they're battling, it's going to come down to that. And Phil Kessel and JVR, they're not there because they don't need to be there.
And they were hurt. They were beaten up and tired at the end of the year. So that's.
And that can, but what player isn't? I mean, tell me like Malkin's not hurt right now. I mean, it's like Russian players. I think this is a little bit of like Russian guilt inside them right now to be there. I think that after what happened in the Olympics, I think that there's a sense that we got to go back there and regain some of our pride. We want our relatives to be treated well in their own countries. I think this is that. I think there's some of that going on right now. I honestly do. But
we'll visit the no, never mind.
Yeah. But great stuff, Julie. I appreciate it, and it's really an interesting thing. We'll talk more about it, but it's a good thing to talk about because there is no hockey tonight, and so I hope you guys enjoy your evening off of the sport. I personally will be coaching highly aggressive 11-year-old girls soccer. So and it's really gotten to the point where there was a bench clearing brawl the other day in the league that we're in. It's 11-year-old girls. Yeah, so it's believe me, it's unbelievable. Just there's a great if you check one of my tweets from last night, Jay McKee, who's one of my favorite people on the planet, tweeted out a story about him as basically thanking his parents for not being jerks of parents when he was in youth sports. And basically the whole thing he says, thanks for not doing this, thanks for not doing that. It's a really cool tweet, and it's off his Facebook page. Just check it out. It's in my Twitter timeline, and it's really worth it. And I knowing Jay as I do, this made all the sense in the world that he would be the guy who comes up with this. And please remember that youth sports are not about becoming a pro. I mean, it's just insane. I can't even begin to tell you. So anyway, I'll leave it there. But remember, guys, without the buzz,
it's just hockey.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon.